Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Look, we're going to just jump right in today because we are tackling a deeply profound and honestly a wildly misunderstood psychological dynamic. We're going to unpack exactly why our parents parentified us, how that shaped who we are today, and most importantly, how we can actually heal and reclaim our true authentic selves so we can do better with our own families. If you have ever felt just completely drained by your family dynamics, I promise you this explainer is going to be incredibly eye-opening.
So let me ask you a question, and I want you to really think about this. When you were growing up, which way did the care usually flow between you and your parents? Were you kind of the mature kid? The gifted one who always seemed to be doing the emotional housekeeping for the adults in the room? If you were the kid quietly listening while the adults vented, or if you were constantly keeping the peace just so nobody got angry, I want to take a second to validate just how exhausting that was. You were literally doing a full-time job you were never supposed to have. All right, let's get into section 1, the gifted child trap.
So parentification basically flips the healthy flow of care completely upside down. In a healthy dynamic, care flows downhill. The parent serves the developmental needs of the child. But with parentification, the child ends up serving the needs of the parent. And the really tragic result of this is that the child internalizes a massive lie. They learn that love is not just a given. They learn that safety and love actually have to be earned by being relentlessly useful and constantly accommodating everyone else.
Now, this basically comes in two distinct flavors. First, you have instrumental parentification. This is the very literal stuff, doing the chores, raising your younger siblings, basically managing the household like an adult. But on the flip side, we have emotional parentification. And this is when the kid is basically acting as a surrogate spouse or a therapist or confidant. It involves a lot of deeply inappropriate TMI, just way too much information about things a developing child should absolutely never have to carry, like a parent's marital issues or their adult anxieties. Psychologist Alice Miller actually hit the nail on the head when talking about the core tragedy here, which she called the false self. She wrote, "The small and lonely child that is hidden behind their achievements wakes up and asks, 'What would have happened if I had appeared before you bad, ugly, angry? Where would your love have been then?'" To survive, these kids basically traded away their authentic childishness, their messiness, their anger, their basic needs, just to earn a feeling of safety. They built this highly capable, super agreeable false self because they subconsciously figured out that their parents' love was entirely conditional on their performance. And this creates what Miller identified as the twin poles of the gifted child. On one end, you have grandiosity. That's the adult who builds their whole identity around being highly capable, the one who gets things done and never causes a problem. But, well, nobody can be perfect forever, right? So the very second they make a mistake, they swing wildly over to the other pole, depression. Because their entire sense of self-worth is built on being effective, falling short makes them feel completely unlovable. It's just this exhausting, never-ending cycle of chronic people-pleasing and performance. Which brings us to section 2, why parents parentify us.
Okay, we really need to talk about a concept called symbiosis, which is also known as enmeshment. Now, parents don't always do this maliciously. They aren't sitting in a villain chair plotting to ruin your childhood. Often they're just stuck in an unconscious, developmentally stunted state where they completely lack distinct ego boundaries. They literally cannot tell the difference between their own internal emotional chaos and the external world around them.
So how does this unconscious enmeshment actually happen? Basically, the parent is unable to manage their own emotional instability or narcissistic voids, so they unconsciously regress to an infantile state. Then, they idealize the child. Because those ego boundaries are totally gone, the parent essentially absorbs the child into their own mind. The child is used as a self-object, or almost like a mental womb, to regulate the parent's fragmented identity. The parent is literally taking their own emotional baggage and putting it inside the child to manage. So how did we survive that? Let's look at section 3, the symbiotic bargain. When you're a kid, you don't really have any power, right? So to survive, you make a subconscious deal. The child basically says, "I will suppress my true self and manage your emotions if you provide me with safety and conditional love." We really have to frame this bargain accurately. It was a choice you had to make for your own survival back when you were powerless. But now that we're adults, we have to unpack and renegotiate this exact trade. That man, there is a really steep hidden cost to that bargain. It leaves you with what psychologists call introjects inside your mind. Think of it like a really toxic, hostile board of directors living inside your head. These are automatic negative thoughts, or ants. They form this bad internalized object that constantly whispers that you're inadequate or unworthy or stupid. And the wildest part, these are actually just the voices and expectations of your parents masquerading as your own thoughts. They override what you actually want and keep you locked inside that performative false self.
All right, let's pivot to the good stuff. Section 4, healing your false self.
Now, I gotta be honest with you, healing is completely nonlinear. First, you have to grieve. And this is heavy, heavy emotional work, where you really mourn the childhood you lost and the unconditional love you didn't get. Second, you have to identify those negative introjects, those hostile voices, and actively challenge them. And third, you have to renegotiate that old internal bargain. Real healing isn't some tropical paradise destination where you just feel happy all the time. Actually, it's a messy, arduous process of digging up who you really are underneath the act. But hey, massive red flag to watch out for here. Beware of your own false self. Remember, your false self is highly competent and deeply, deeply wired to please other people. So if you aren't careful, you will start performing recovery. You'll use all the right therapy buzzwords just to become your therapist's favorite patient. You have to make sure you are actually making contact with the messy, authentic parts of yourself, and not just acting out a brand new script to win someone's approval. The good news is we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I want you to think of your treats as ponies pulling your cart. The naughty pony represents your neurotic motivations, like being caring just to appease anger or keep the peace because you're scared. But the noble pony represents your pure virtues. You might actually just be a deeply empathetic, naturally caring person. You absolutely get to keep your beautiful empathy, you just have to change the motivation behind it. You're acting out of genuine care now, not out of a desperate need to buy your own safety.
Finally, let's talk about the future. In Section 5, breaking the cycle.
So what does healthy differentiation actually look like in practice when it comes to your family? Well, it means allowing absolute separateness. You are you, and they are them. It means officially retiring, handing in your badge from your role as the family's emotional caretaker. And I absolutely love this last point, enabling thwarted success. This means finally giving yourself full permission to pursue the hobbies, the joys, or the career paths that you previously had to abandon because they threatened the family dynamic. You step out of the cage, let other adults handle their own emotions, and that is exactly how you make sure you don't pass this trauma down to the next generation. But listen, you gotta be ready for something called the extinction burst. It's a concept from behaviorism. When you stop playing your assigned role, when you fundamentally change your shape as a puzzle piece, the rest of the family system is gonna feel the pressure, and they will likely push back with extreme resistance. They'll double down on their old behaviors to try and shove you back into your box. It is totally natural to want to cave when this happens, but you have to hold your ground. Expect the pushback, see it for what it is, and stay rooted in your new, authentic self. So I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative question to really chew on. Who are you, really, underneath the act? And what would happen in your life, in your relationships, and for your future if you allowed yourself to be fully, authentically you, starting today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep healing, and I will see you next time.